walls requiring proper configurations. Best practices for mitigating the effects of incidents once they've occurred: straightforward communication. Don't hide the incident. Talk about it. Tell the community what's happened and what you're doing to fix it. Take decisive and timely action, and have interdisciplinary teams established before the incident occurs. You don't have time once an incident occurs to go find the person in the attorney's office of your university who knows something about computers. You don't have time to go find a risk manager who has a clue about CISAD administration and systems. You need to have that team already established. And deploy automated enforcement tools for standard configuration. That's the quarantine zone issue. And the best practices they gave us for managing the incidents were having and following pre-established procedures, having the interdisciplinary team in place, frequent communication, and telling the community that what has happened and what you're doing. When really bad problems have happened in these organizations, it's when somebody tries to hide it. Hide the fact that there's been a big exposure. And then what happens is 62 people are trying to find out what's going on, why this system is acting this way, what happened. And before you know it, you have multiple incidents happening because people are getting in the works and mucking it up. If you could just tell them right up front there's been an exposure, like the California law that requires people to be notified. This is outside the organization. But inside the organization, tell people it's occurred, tell them what you're doing to fix it, and tell them to stay off the system, be patient. Don't try to get in and investigate themselves. The causes are clear. I don't know our time. Somebody might want to tell me.
We have 5 minutes left.
Oh, okay, good. We'll go to questions. The causes are clear. Policies, procedural requirements, and education. These factors are strong. They came out strong. Our tendency, when we look at education as one of the cause, the lack of education as a cause factor, is to say, duh. You know, we're academics. What else do you think I'm going to say? Teach, 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 educate, educate, educate. That's not where this came from. This came from the analysis. Instead, like Nike, I think we should just say, just do it. We know education is what needs to happen. We know our system administrators often are faculty members or secretaries or students or a staff member who has an interest in computers. No further training than that. That is insufficient for the quality and the quantity of networks we're now operating. Just a couple of comments. The quarantine zones, I said, are happening. I think that's a very positive step for academia. The categorization system, I don't think, provided us much of anything in this research. And I'll tell you why. As we went back and analyzed how people were categorizing, when we'd say to somebody who had given us an incident, is this a people systems or data incident? We saw two types of response. Our way of thinking of it was, what was the motivation of the perpetrator? Were they after a person, after a system, or after data? That's what we were thinking about, the front end of this motivation. Many of our respondents were thinking response. And so they would say, in their heads, the first thing I have to do is fix the system XYZ part. They were thinking about what this incident was going to mean to them. And if it was a systems fix that had to be put in place, they called it a systems incident. Even though the motivation might have been to get at a person. They saw it as a breach in their system. And so there were two different responses happening. That says to me that there wasn't reliable use of this, and we need to do better clarification if we're going to try to have a categorization system. The other thing that is very important is corporations and not-for-profits use their risk managers and auditors. They get them right in there looking at what's happening in their IT systems and whether their IT systems are following policies. Colleges and universities primarily relegate the auditors to financial operations. They aren't using them to track whether our policies are being followed, whether we are in fact setting standards and operating according to those standards. I think and have recommended for a long time that we don't allow people to be system administrators until they have followed a certification path, until they've been trained, and until they are adequately supervised. The certification is a mixed bag because there aren't very good programs right now, or they're extraordinarily expensive for certifying people to do system administration. We have to come up with a better solution there. Eleanor Roosevelt said, learn from the mistakes of others. You can't live long enough to make them yourself. And I would say that we now have enough information about these incidents that we can learn from them, and we know what we need to do. We need to put standards in place, and we need to train and educate. So I'm pretty excited by the way that came out, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you have. I hope you have some. Any questions about that research or the findings or the methodology?
If you ask a question, be sure to press the microphone button so it's picked up on the tape. I'll make two observations. The first is that the Privacy Rights Clearinghouse announced in December that in 2005-2006 combined, the discovered and announced disclosures of personal information in the U.S. amounted to over 100 million records worth. So, indeed, there are incidents occurring everywhere. That was across government, industry, and academia, and that's a lot. That's one out of every three of us, or some unlucky people are getting multiple times of exposure. The second comment is, in academia, one of the difficulties is the funding agencies will not allow us to budget for professional system administrators on research budgets. And so we have to settle for individuals who are perhaps not as well trained. And have you had an opportunity to present this to, say, people at NSF
Actually,
with that in mind?
I haven't presented these. Well, they have them in their hands right now, but I haven't presented. But prior to doing this study, the vice president of EDUCAUSE and I went to NSF and talked about the importance of coming up with a grant to provide certification training for system administrators. We didn't have these data at that time, and it felt too common to them. They didn't get it, basically. And so I decided not to waste my time with that, but to write this grant instead. And so now we have some data that we can go back to them if anybody wants to do that kind of a grant. I want to go back to one of the things Jean just said about personal information. One of the things that's happening that we as individuals need to be really cognizant of is corporations and businesses are, in banks, are the ones that are in fact having vulnerabilities and releases of data. But what they do is turn that around and require more data from us as a way of trying to secure. In other words, it's not enough to give your name. It's not enough to use your PIN. It's not enough to give your mother's maiden name. They're asking for more and more and more pieces of personal information, as if one more piece was going to verify your identity and secure your data even a little more. The reality is we need to be pushing back and saying to them, if we give you this information, you are obliged to secure it. And if there's a break, we are holding you liable. Because as long as they can just throw that back on us as individuals, we'll never have enough of a class action activity to make any response. We'll just have to keep giving our data. It isn't about us. It is about us giving information to people whose systems are, in fact, not secure. Just before coming, maybe last night, and it's somewhat related, and I'll just say this quickly. If any of you have these loyalty cards from your grocery stores or your Pharmacies. How many of you in the room have a loyalty